Welcome back to Verbal Sparring, and welcome to the State of the UFC, June 4th, 2025. If you are new to the channel, then that means you're new to this video series, and what it is a monthly series where I break down the previous month's UFC action. So for example, this episode, we'll be talking about all of the 4 fight cards that we saw in May of 2025 for the UFC. I will go through each card on a fight-by-fight basis and break down the statistics in terms of knockouts, submissions, decisions, our finishing percentages, what weight classes saw the most action, and I will talk about how the rankings were directly impacted in the aftermath of all 4 cards. I will also take a look at where the pound-for-pound rankings sit as we head into the month of June, talk about any newcomers that made their UFC debuts and got victories in their first fight, and take a brief look ahead at what's to come for the following month. So for the month of May, we saw 4 fight cards, and we start with UFC Des Moines at the Wells Fargo Arena in Iowa between Corey Sandhagen and Deiveson Figueiredo. This fight card featured 12 fights in total with 5 KO TKOs, 1 submission, and 6 decisions. We saw 1 knockout in the first and third round and 3 knockouts in the second. The only submission on the night happened in the second round, and all 6 decisions were unanimous. Bantamweight had 4 fights on this card, including that main event between Corey Sandhagen and Deiveson Figueiredo. The middleweight division had 2, and then we saw heavyweight, welterweight, lightweight, women's bantamweight, women's flyweight, and strawweight all have 1 fight each. And for being a fight night, this card actually had a pretty significant role in changing the UFC's rankings in the aftermath of the fight. We start in that main event where we saw Corey Sandhagen finish Deiveson Figueiredo via TKO in round number 2. Corey Sandhagen stayed at number 4, however Deiveson Figueiredo dropped from 5 to 6 and Song Yadong took that number 5 spot. The number 15 ranked bantamweight stopped Daniel Marcos, the first man to ever defeat him as a matter of fact, and he did it with a unanimous decision. He was able to climb 1 spot from 15 to 14, swapping places with Ayman Zahabi, but don't worry, Zahabi finds himself even higher after the month of May concluded. We saw Jillian Roberson continue her momentum since dropping down to the strawweight division, and she got the biggest win of her career by far, especially at 115 pounds, where she not only beat the top 10 at the time ranked Marina Rodriguez, but she finished her in the second round via TKO. Jillian went from number 12 to number 9, breaking into the strawweight top 10 and maybe just 1 or 2 wins away from title contention. And in the aftermath, we actually saw Marina Rodriguez decide to retire and call it a career, so since she was removed completely from the rankings, we saw a lot of shifts upward. Angela Hill, Tisha Pennington, and Luana Pinheiro all rose 1 spot, and Loma Lookboonmee made her debut into the top 15 at number 15. And lastly, we saw the number 10 ranked Yana Santos defeat the number 12 ranked former champion Miesha Tate via unanimous decision. Yana Santos actually got to rise 1 spot to number 9. Miesha Tate dropped 1 spot from 12 to 13. Then we saw the number 8 ranked Eileen Perez, who's surging at the moment, rise up to number 7. We saw Mayra Bueno Silva, the former title challenger, drop from 7 to 8. The number 9 ranked Cara Rosa swap spots with Yana, so go from 9 to 10. And we saw Nora Cornell swap spots with Miesha from 13 to 12, another surging prospect, even though I believe she's like 35 years old. Next up was the lone pay-per-view of the month, and it was UFC 315 at the Bell Center in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, the UFC's first trip back in nearly a decade. This card, much like UFC Des Moines, also featured 12 fights in total, where we saw 3 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 7 decisions. 2 of the knockouts were in the first round, 1 was in the second, and then we had 1 submission in the first and second round. Of the 7 decisions, 6 were unanimous and 1 was a split. The only split decision, as you'll see, of the entire month. Women's flyweight had the most action on this card with 3 fights, including the co-main event championship bout between Valentina Shevchenko and Manon Fiorot. We saw 2 fights at light heavyweight, welterweight, and featherweight, and then 1 fight at middleweight, lightweight, and bantamweight. We start in the welterweight division where we saw Jack Della Maddalena dethrone Belal Muhammad and end his 11-fight unbeaten streak to become the new champion of the world, launching himself there from the number 5 spot. Belal Muhammad obviously drops out of the championship slot and goes down to number 1, which forced number 1 through 4 all to drop 1 spot each: Sean Brady, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Leon Edwards, and Kamaru Usman. We saw the aforementioned Ayman Zahabi, who was at number 15 going into UFC 315, take out the legend Jose Aldo in an absolute banger back and forth fight where he did arguably get a controversial decision nod that went in his favor. He was able to rise 4 spots from number 15 to number 11. Jose Aldo retired for a second time, giving up his ranking, and Vinicius Oliveira was able to crack in due to him dropping out. He now sits at number 15, capping out the bantamweight ranks. We saw the number 5 ranked Natalia Silva improve to 7-0 in the UFC after taking down the former champion Alexa Grasso. She launched herself from that number 5 spot all the way up to number 1 in the world. Alexa Grasso dropped 2 spots down to number 3, which then forced Erin Blanchfield and Maycee Barber both to drop down to number 4 and 5 respectively. And then a little bit back into the rankings, we saw Jasmine Jasudavicius improve her win streak to I think 5 in a row now by taking down the former strawweight champion and flyweight title challenger Jessica Andrade, and she did it with a first round submission, launching herself from number 9 to number 6. Jessica Andrade would fall from 7 to 9, and Rose Namajunas would dip down from 6 to 7. Then we head into our back-to-back Apex cards. First is UFC Vegas 106 in Las Vegas, Nevada, headlined by Gilbert Burns and Michael Morales. This card featured 11 fights with 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 4 decisions. There were 2 first-round knockouts and 1 in the second, and then 2 apiece in the first and second in terms of submissions. And all 4 decisions were unanimously decided upon by the judges. We saw the lightweight division have 3 fights on this card, featherweight and strawweight with 2, and then 1 fight at welterweight, middleweight, flyweight, and women's bantamweight. Michael Morales stayed undefeated by getting the biggest win of his career and catapulting himself into the top 10 by taking down the former title challenger Gilbert Burns with a first-round knockout. He entered the evening at number 12, and he currently sits at number 8 in the world at 170 pounds. Gilbert Burns dropped 2 spots from 8 to 10, which forced the number 10 ranked Jeff Neal to drop down 1 spot to number 11, which then forced Stephen Thompson to drop from 11 to 12. And we saw Tisha Pennington, who was number 13, fight the number 14 ranked Luana Pinheiro. Tisha would get the victory via unanimous decision and now finds herself on a 2-fight win streak, but she didn't move up in the rankings. She stayed at number 13. However, Luana Pinheiro, that was her 4th consecutive loss. She's no longer in the top 15, so taking that number 15 spot was Denise Gomes. And in the second Apex card of the month, it was headlined by, well, it depends on how you want to look at it. Technically, it was supposed to be Erin Blanchfield versus Maycee Barber, but the true main event ended up being Mateusz Gamrot and Ludovic Klein. And that is because with just minutes to spare before the octagon doors were to close and Bruce Buffer was to announce the names of Erin Blanchfield and Maycee Barber had to be pulled from the fight due to a medical issue, and it was canceled just minutes before it was supposed to begin. Not to mention, we saw other fights get canceled the day before during the weigh-ins, so this card only had 9 total fights with 1 knockout, 2 submissions, and 6 decisions. The lone knockout came in the first round, and both submissions also came in the first round, and all 6 decisions were unanimous. The lightweight division had 3 fights on this card, and then we saw 1 fight in 6 different weight classes: light heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, flyweight, women's featherweight, believe it or not, even though it was supposed to be a bantamweight fight between Ketlen Vieira and Macy Chachon with a lot of stakes behind it. Instead, Caitlin decided she didn't want to make the weight, and they made it a featherweight bout on Friday. And then we saw a strawweight fight too. And in the aftermath of this card, there were no changes to the rankings, so that's it for UFC Vegas 107. Now let's talk about where the pound-for-pound rankings stand as we head into the 4-card month of June for the UFC. We saw Valentina Shevchenko defend her title successfully, and she is still at the top of the pound-for-pound rankings for the women at number 1, with Zhang Weili creeping in for a potential super fight behind her at number 2. Manon Fiorot, who lost the title fight to Valentina, is at number 4. Natalia Silva, who got a big win over the number 5 ranked pound-for-pound fighter Alexa Grasso, finds herself at number 8. And capping out the top 15 is Maycee Barber. And then for the men, Islam Makhachev is still number 1 pound for pound in the world, even though technically he's not the lightweight champion. And if you look at the number 3 spot held by Ilia Topuria, he's not a champion either. And that's because Ilia Topuria vacated his title, which now belongs to Alexander Volkanovski. And Islam Makhachev, well, I guess he is technically still the lightweight champion, but he's going to be vacating it soon to move up to 170 and challenge Jack Della Maddalena. Which means someone has to win the lightweight championship, right? Well, Yes, that's Ilia Topuria taking on Charles Oliveira at the end of June at International Fight Week. John Jones still sits at number 2, even though he hardly ever fights. The new welterweight champion of the world after May, Jack Della Maddalena, cracked into the top 10 pound for pound, sitting at number 9. He wasn't even in the top 15 prior to that win over Bilal, who now sits at number 13. And capping out the top 15 is Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, who's taking on Ilia Topuria for that lightweight title and a chance to become a 2-time champion and give Ilia the first loss of his career at the end of the month. So now let's bring all 4 of the May 2025 UFC cards together to tally up our totals. We had 44 fights between the 4 cards with 12 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 23 decisions, which brings our finishing rate for the month to 47.7%. We saw 6 first-round knockouts, 5 in the second, and just 1 in the third. And of the 9 submissions, 5 happened in round 1 and 4 in round 2. In the craziest split of the year so far, no pun intended, for the decision totals, 22 of them were unanimous, with just 1 split decision seeing the judges differ. And in terms of the weight classes and how many fights we saw for each of them, heavyweight continues to just be so lackluster in 2025, having just 1 fight in May. And I feel like this shouldn't count, but technically it does. Women's featherweight is back with a vengeance. They had 1 fight in May, and it was Ketlin Vieira versus Macy Chasson, 2 top 5 bantamweights. Gotta love it. And the division with the most action in the month of May was the lightweight division with 8. We saw middleweight, welterweight, and bantamweight have 5 fights each, 4 fights at featherweight, women's flyweight and strawweight, 3 fights at light heavyweight, and 2 fights at flyweight and women's bantamweight. We move to our next segment, Welcome to the Show, and it is about which UFC newcomers got a victory in their UFC debut. And across the 4 cards, we only saw 1 debutant find success in their first bout. And that was at UFC Vegas 106, where Yadier Duval defeated Connor Matthews via first-round submission in the featherweight division. So that is it for all of the numbers, all of the rankings changes, and everything in between for the month of May. What do we have to look forward to in the month of June, which is stealing the headlines right now in the MMA community? Everyone is ecstatic for all of the big fights that we're going to see this month. It starts this upcoming weekend when I'm recording this and releasing it on June 7th for UFC 316, where we'll see 2 championship fights. The headliner is a rematch between Merab Dvalishvili and Sean O'Malley, co-main evented with a grudge match between Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison. Then the UFC heads back to Atlanta, Georgia with a beautiful headliner in the welterweight division between former champion Kamaru Usman and the surging Joaquin Buckley. Then for the first time in UFC history, they will head to Baku, Azerbaijan. Did I butcher that country? More than likely so. The headlining bout will be between former champion Jamal Hill and former title challenger Khalil Roundtree Jr. And capping out the month is the aforementioned International Fight Week card with 2 more championship fights, the vacant lightweight title between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira, and the flyweight championship of the world being defended once again by Alexandre Pantoja, this time against Kai Kara France. So that is it for the June 4th, 2025 edition of the State of the UFC. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You can look forward to this series every single month, as well as weekly previews heading into each UFC card and weekly recaps for the most meaningful results, as well as my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where podcast episodes are released there every Monday and Friday. Have a great week, enjoy the fights this upcoming weekend, and I will see you all in the next video.